We've added our undertone of yellow. Now we'll proceed to apply the orange tones and the other tones of the clouds. I'm feeling the paper to see how wet or dry it is, and it's pretty dry, but it's a little bit wet still, which is fine, because what we're going to do is wet the top part once again. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm looking at the light as it reflects off the paper. I'm looking to see how shiny it is, how much of the water is giving off light. And I want the texture of the paper to begin to show. I don't want the paper to be completely flooded, where the pigment will disperse without any control whatsoever. I've just mixed alizarin crimson and cadmium yellow deep. All right. I'm just looking at the orange. I'm not paying attention to the clouds above just yet. I'm leaving space here for the sun. Okay, now I'm going to dab out the sun area just a little bit. We're adding in some raw umber now, capturing those undertones in the clouds above. Okay. Using the side of the brush again. Small marks always help add nuance and dimension and character to our paintings. Now, let's see if we can put in these foreground clouds. I'm mixing my Payne's Gray, alizarin crimson, and raw umber. Clouds are so forgiving. They're also very beautiful. Clouds closest to the source of light are actually lighter. And that's a good principle for all painting, is that whenever an object is closest to the source of light, it becomes lighter itself. Now, I'm really loading up my brush now to bring in those heavy dark tones. Now, our reference photo is just that, it's a reference. So we don't have to be too concerned about being literal. That's too much work anyway. It's always better to underdo a painting than overdo it. If you underdo it, you can come back and fix it or try to salvage it. If you overdo it, there's not much you can do. As our clouds are drying, we can go ahead and start working on the foreground water. When I look at the water carefully in our reference photo, I see three basic colors. The very light yellow, kind of a mid-range yellowish brown tone, and the black shadows being caught by the waves. Our yellow's already there, so adding the next darkest color will be a medium colored brown. I'm using the Payne's Gray and the raw umber to create our mid-tones. As we look at the reference photo, we can see the light coming directly toward us from the sun. And so we want to be alert to that as we add our midtones. I'm mostly concerned with what's going on right here. The waves are larger the closer they are to you. So I'm trying to make these marks up here smaller to help create that sense of perspective. You notice I'm starting to dab my brush. That just helps the mark not look so literally like a brush stroke. Again, I'm being conscientious of my strokes being horizontal. As was mentioned earlier, we don't need to make this literal, especially in these tiny areas. We want to create an impression, an effect. Okay, let's see if we can begin adding in the darkest tones into our water. You'll notice that my paint is very thick on the brush. If there was too much water under the brush, it would disperse over our painted area and possibly spoil it. So fairly dry brush here. If you look at our reference photo, you'll notice that there's a reflection. The distant hills are reflected, even though it's diffused. You see something of a reflection out here. It's a little heavier right here. This whole side is actually darker. It's darker through here. Oh, yes. These small marks help create this sense of waves. It would be, using a larger brush for something like this, it will make it look more expressive, more gestural. And I would recommend that you experiment with different kinds of brushes to see the effect that they produce. As we're going, our paper is drying, which is fine. That means our marks will be sharper edged. Some of these little shadows are pretty sharp. I'm letting my strokes be larger in the foreground, smaller toward the back because they would be naturally smaller. I'm at a point now where I'm asking myself, have I done enough or should I do more? When you're at that point, it may be a good point to stop at, because as I mentioned earlier, it's easier to go back in and add things we've missed than to paint too much and have the piece become muddy. So at this point, I think I'm satisfied with what I've done. We'll let it dry and see if we need to do more or go on to the final piece. My foreground water has dried now, and I've decided it looks just fine. So we're going to move on to the third piece of this painting, which is the distant silhouette of mountains. We're going to begin by applying a combination of alizarin crimson and cadmium yellow deep into this area. You'll notice when you observe our reference photo, the brilliant orange tone that is nearest the sun. This area right in here is the critical area. If we can navigate this well, it will surely express that quality of dramatic sunset we're after. I'm drying my brush a little to pull up the paint. By the same token, I want to make sure that it's saturated with that deep red tone close to the light source. And coming from the outside edge is that beautiful, sharp silhouetted edge. Now that I have the basic shape there, I want to nuance it a little bit. So it's not too perfect. All right, there we have it. In these exercises, we've explored beautiful sunsets. And I would encourage you as you're out in the world to look at the sky, look at the light, look how it casts sunlight and shadows and fills the sky with color. And this will give you an opportunity to carry some ideas to the studio where you can explore on your own.
Now available on DVD. Try these techniques yourself at home whenever you wish. The extended version of today's workshop is now available to order on DVD from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.